level message, really trying to introduce the companies and law firms within the continent, that there is talent over the border as well as locally, and also international brands moving in to do it properly. And I've had a lot of experience in Asia of law firms moving into China and Singapore, Indonesia, Thailand, Hong Kong, and not doing it correctly, doing it wrong and closing and leaving. So there's a lot. I've just given you a lot of information there, but as in, I know but we're doing a lot, and it's really. I often say this. I might have been here nearly 8 years, but I feel like I'm just at the beginning, because these countries are so nuanced. They're so different. You know, I mean, you just mentioned there, you grew up in India. I mean, it's another country that is just so massive and so nuanced. And so, you know, I mean, if you go from one side of the country to the other, you come across so many different cultures and languages. The way of doing business in each of those cities and provinces, very similar to the African continent. And then finally, on that point as well, what excites me is that there's a big connection between the growth in the Middle East and Africa as well. You know, you've got, I was in Riyadh in May. I'm going to be in Dubai at the Middle Eastern General Council Summit in 2 weeks' time, speaking on the future of in-house remuneration and salaries, etc. Riyadh was just incredible, you know, and there's a lot of connection between East Africa and the Middle East. So it's all going really, really well. And I think a lot of our clients and lawyers are enjoying the fact that I've been through a lot of mistakes in Asia, and I've seen what's happened, what pitfalls companies have fallen into. So, but yeah, it's changing time, as you alluded to in your notes about A&O and Hogan Lovells as well.
Definitely. And I just wanted to talk about it because I think that's really interesting. Seeing that paradox of obviously international law firms who are deciding to move out, do you think that on the one hand that can be seen as, you know, what are they thinking about the future of the African legal market? But do you think that gives the chance for local law firms and other law firms to step in and take that step? Or do you think that signals that other law firms will also be following that trajectory and exiting the market instead?
Yeah. Phenomenal question again. It really is, and it's a very hot topic at the moment, because obviously, you know, the South African legal market has been, well, my phone has been off the hook, to be honest.
I can imagine,
Just people asking what's going on, really. I'll always tell you what's on my mind and what I believe is true, because we do a lot of data and a lot of analysis, and we work with a lot of firms. I'll be careful not to mention any names, and I'll try to distinct for my sake, where it's an opinion, I'll caveat it with, this is just my opinion. South Africa is a wonderful country. It's a nuanced and tricky little beast. It is a country with 3 capitals and 12 official languages. It is so wonderfully diverse. Diversity in this country is what makes it the most amazing place. One of the most amazing places I've lived. I often joke with my South African colleagues that when it clicks that how good you guys are, you're going to take over the world. But from a legal perspective, it's a market that's facing a lot of challenge. Okay, so you have it's one of the most splintered legal markets in the world. There's 30,000 registered attorneys and 15,500 law firms registered. So that's a 2-to-1 ratio. And in London, I think it would be like 22-to-1 or something. You know, it's very splintered. So the bulk of the industry here is one-person shops or 2 people. There's a very small number of international law firms and a very small number of local firms with over 25 people. So the splintering does affect remuneration, and it does affect opportunities as well, because there's a lot of people who don't hire because they just, you know, they stay on their own. So it's a difficult market. And add to that as well, I'm just giving some context, by the way. Add to that as well, you've got the Law Society here said something like, in rough numbers, about 5,000 students leaving a legal an education facility with a legal qualification every year. I know that's quite vast, but and only 1,000 trainee positions. and that obviously compounds every year. So just since I've been here, that, I don't know, do the math, the 4 times 8, 4,000, 4,000 times 8 years of people who haven't managed to get a traineeship. It's got very big challenges. You've then got, and I'll, and I'm not offering an opinion here, but you have certain employment legislation here that is tricky. You have what they call triple BEE, which is broad-based Black economic empowerment, which is part of the legislation that jobs must go to those who are previously disadvantaged before anyone else. Now, I'm not here to offer an opinion. It's a hurdle that a lot of firms struggle with, because you're already talking about a talent pool that's quite small, and then you make it even smaller. Then you, and then also you've got the unions are very strong here. Not that that affects law, but that affects businesses in terms of affecting growth. So there's a lot of things that need to sort of maneuver and adapt. But it also, in the same breath, we're talking about a country that's only been a democracy for 30 years. Coming out of the worst environment and political structure you could even imagine. I mean, that's only 30 years ago. So there's a lot of people in the workplace who were working when that was happening. So, I always mention the trials and tribulations that companies face when they come into South Africa, but I also mention it, I would caveat it with, it's still a very young country, and when we're young, we make mistakes, right? So, and we learn, but it's a country that's very passionate about getting things right and doing the right thing for the right people. So bringing that back full circle to the legal market, I said very categorically that the departures by those 2 law firms were not systematic, or symptomatic rather, of the market as a whole. That was definitely more, again, I think, and it's not unfair of me to say, I read one piece, A&O didn't really make much of a statement. A&O Sherman, they just said, thanks to everybody, we're closing Johannesburg. The fact that they might not have got the strategy right, or they may not have, it might not be a core market. They've just gone through a merger, haven't they? A&O, Sherman, Sterling. They're looking at it probably thinking, well, it's not making a huge amount of money in comparison to other countries, and maybe it's not. I think they've closed a few offices, so it's not like it's a standalone. And Hogan Lovells, they obviously had their well-documented issues post-Zondo Commission, which was the Chief Justice Raymond Zondo who put together the report here on state capture. They were heavily implicated in that as their former. Then they closed it, and then they restarted it. And I think one of the statements on one of the articles by a former partner was, "We never quite found our place in South Africa." And I think that's probably that's wonderfully put. So they're very isolated incidents of companies that have gone, you know what, we don't need to be there, we're going to move on. They may have South African lawyers in their London office that would be able to do the work, for instance. So it's not the market is wonderfully nuanced. I think there's a lot of very strong players, very similar to somewhere like Korea or as Singapore used to be, where they've got strong law firms. Seoul is a prime example. There's 3 major law firms, and here there's 5 big ones. And South Africa as an economy isn't that big. It isn't massive. It isn't, America. It is. So I think maybe a few challenges would probably lead to those firms looking and going. So my tips for any international firm is, if you're not looking at the African continent, not necessarily South Africa, but the African continent, then you are crazy. But when you do come in to the markets, wherever it be Kenya, Morocco, Algeria, Egypt, Nigeria, Angola, Ghana, wherever it may be, do it from I coined the phrase local first. That's the tip I always give them from a strategic perspective. Local first. Bed yourself in, understand the market. Like I've moved here. I moved here 7 years ago. I moved my whole family, my kids and everything. And understand the market you're in, and understand the nuances and the languages and the cultures, and make a life there. Pay your taxes, buy a house. really go through the growth, as it were, and you'll find your place, and then you can look international, which again is one of my strategic tips for my law firm clients that I typically help them with, or we help them with. So, yeah, I think it shocked a few people when such big, wonderful brands as A&O Sherman and Hogan Lovells exit a market. But once you look into it and you isolate it, and no, it's not a surprise. And I mean, I think we found out the other day, didn't we, that the A&O team just moved over the road to Bowman. So, and I'm sure the guys at Hogan Lovells will also find themselves good homes. So I think if it shows anybody anything, it's not easy in life. It's not easy to move to a new country, build a life, build a market, make money, and do. So yeah, it's not. And that goes for anybody listening to this. But it's not impossible. So yeah, I know I've got big hopes for this continent.
Definitely. And I don't want to take up too much of your time, but just to sort of finish off, I guess, looking a little bit at, we spoke a lot about growth and looking at the future. So can you tell us a little bit about the plans for the GRN Group over the next couple of years, some goals you have for the African region and perhaps any other